check your bass boosting and check your microphone volume.
Yeah, my microphone volume's at 61 right now.
Bro, I can hear you echoing in my head. Like, bro, like what?
It's in. It's in. It's on 61. That's not my fault.
No, it's not the mic. You just need to back up a bit. You just need to back up.
I am backed up. My mic is normal. It's just that before. It's just that before I was whispering because I didn't. Because I wanted to.
Here,
yeah, when you whisper, it's normal, but when you speak normally, it's a loud mic.
Yeah, I know, but that's why but then my other mic broke. That's why I also kept trying to, like, help me on my other mic, because my other mic, it just allowed mics naturally, even if I'm whispering. But for this mic, if I talk normally.
Shut the fuck up and get to the topic.
Dirty chicken fingers, why, I love you, bro.
I just bullied this kid, and he still wants to.
What?
Damn, bro. What?
I'm a minor.
Here, you know, I was gonna super beat him. But you know, I did find that last show kind of funny. So.
Dirty, funny, bro.
But yeah, you can. I think morality, as for what I think about that, I think morality is extremely important if you're not to applied ethics. If you're not talking about legality, if you're talking about the moral stance of something, moral is going to be important. Because without morality, there wouldn't be any moral stance about it. That's why we have certain views like relativism, particularism, things like that, right? To argue about and to see, okay, within the scope of this lens, is this important? Is this morally okay or not?
Okay, so here's the thing, right? When we're talking about applied ethics and meta ethics, okay, we're talking about someone's like reasoning for why that they personally, right? They personally justify. Well, why is this like this a plot like this moral stance that they have or this moral proposition? Why they lean a certain way? Now, I'm not saying that you're not supposed to like talk about like their like, well, how do they justify it? Like, oh, they justify it through like, let's say utilitarianism for like some fucked up reason, right? They take like, oh, utilitarianism is like, oh, blah blah blah, this, that, and the third, right? Why society, like, why we should be basing it on like the society on like the many instead of the whole, okay? Instead of attacking like the meta-ethical stance of it, I think that you're supposed to be personally trying to find the logical contradictions in one, their stance, like as in their argument for like why that they're like why the meta-ethical framework of like utilitarianism will work with like, let's say, veganism, okay? So like, let's say like, I don't know, like they give like a proposition, like somehow like a syllogism for like why the fuck like, oh, under utilitarianism, like veganism would be okay, and then like it's like bop, and somehow Pillars 3 is like saying like, oh, well, if we're not like, if for vegan we should be saving more lives or something like that, or something like more lives or whatever, contributing to like the mass whole of lives or something like that, for basically, and then just incorporating animals in it. I think that you should be trying to like find a way to distinguish like, well, why is this, right? Why should we use this, like, why should we put this and apply this to, like, let's say, like, the meta-ethic of it, like, so basically the utilitarian view of it. I don't think that we should be, like, necessarily just attacking utilitarianism as a whole, like, because that's just kind of, like, retarded at that point, because then you're not, like, really talking about the topic anymore. You're just talking about someone's moral system and why is it stupid. Like, you're not, like, justifying, like, why you should be doing this act or why you shouldn't be doing this act anymore. Or like try to find inconsistencies on why like the moral proposition doesn't like really work or whatever, or why is it wrong. Like now you're just talking about like, well, utilitarianism is a fucking kill the princess and justify it.
Shut the fuck up, dumb bitch.
Mid-debate. This is why you're experienced, bitch. And I'm not arguing for you. This is a mid-debate.
I just got booted from my thing. That was so weird. Anyways, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're discussing about something like utilitarianism, or you're discussing about something like applied ethics, regardless, that's why we discuss legality and we discuss morality. When discussing something about veganism, right, I define my stance as me thinking things are morally permissible, me not seeing any objective obligation for me morally to find this okay, or me morally to follow this ideology. And you agreed with me. We got to this general consensus by me specifying what moral ideology I have and why I take this to be morally okay. Now, to address your other point, you tried to say to me, oh, well, that's why we try to find out logical consistency rather than looking at it, the moral ideology as a whole. The logical inconsistency is found within a moral inconsistency. For example, ask yourself, for example, we use name the trait, right, to try to find this moral difference, right? And if we don't find this moral difference, it's a logical absurdity, or in other words, as logicians like to call it, a moral inconsistency. See, I'm not saying we just take a look at, I'm not saying that it's a meta-ethic, because obviously meta-ethics is arguing which moral ideology is okay, but within applied ethics, we take a moral ideology, we look inside the scope of it, and we see whether this thing lines up or whether it's morally consistent within its own ideology or not.
Alright, so my question would be to you, because, alright, so to respond to your first point, wait, briefly go over your first point, so we could just do this point by point. What was your first point again?
My first point? Well, my first point was supposedly, right? Okay, well, we take a look at the scope of it, right? And wait, I had multiple... what do you mean by first point? I had multiple first points because we went over, like, multiple debate topics.
Yeah, so basically, right, you were just saying, like, no, okay, so you said, like, the point before you said, like, inside the scope or whatever, you know what I mean?
Inside the scope? Oh, when I was addressing 2 points? Yeah, sure. I take moral ideologies, right, to be something like, we discuss these moral ideologies. We either have legality or morality. For example, for example, this is how we got to a general consensus on our first thing. I clarified my moral stance that I'm a moral particularist and that it wasn't necessarily, right, I don't think it's necessarily wrong, right? I don't see any moral obligation or objective obligation for me to follow this. And by clarifying this moral stance, we got to this general consensus. That was my first point.
So firstly, I'd like to say the moral particularist position. Okay, so when you say the stance of, oh, I don't think that there's objective things, okay, there's an objective reasoning for why I should be persuaded to do this moral act, okay? In that premise alone, that premise isn't really attacking, like, oh, necessarily the reasoning for why we shouldn't, like, for, let's say, like, doing this, like, in a certain person's view or whatever, like, say, I like to eat meat because I don't want to kill animals or some bullshit like that, right? That's not necessarily attacking that bullshit. It's just attacking, like, oh, well, I'm attacking moral objectivism. So anyone who has, like, the moral objectivist, like, framework, right? Like, you would have a problem there. But, like, let's say, like, you're going against a moral subjectivist, right? Like, who necessarily doesn't believe that stuff, but still says, like, oh, right? Like, let's say, like, we should be do this more in society or something like that. It takes, like, a societal standpoint. Like, well, why would that be technically wrong? Like, why, when they're justifying, like, morals through, like, a societal standpoint, I don't understand how that's, like, really, like, equivalent or whatever. Right? Because, like, your premise wouldn't matter there. Your premise would still be okay for their worldview. But they would still be arguing for a position that's contrary to yours. So you would still be having, like, oh, like, this, like, basically fine line of basically, like, yeah, I agree to their position, but also, no, I don't agree to their position, and also, like, no, I don't agree to their position, and your fundamental, like, your kind of foundation of your argument is targeted completely to something else, rather than, let's say, oh, I don't know, like, the actual person's, like, meta-ethical standpoint or meta-ethical view. And then secondly, right, as you were talking about moral inconsistencies, well, moral particularism in and of itself is an inconsistent stance. Moral particularism is, like, the basis of, like, oh, you have particulars, and those particulars you give moral value to. So if this is and you kind of, it's like it's kind of like self-evident, okay? So, like, you basically are saying, like, this is what I give more, like, a particular value to. This, and this is what I rank higher than this, okay? Well, that in stance in and of itself could be inconsistent as fuck as well. So, like, I just, like, try to understand, like, how moral inconsistencies necessarily mean, like, oh, this is a bad argument, right? Because some moral systems already inherently have moral inconsistencies and are still considered fine. We've seen Jack Angstreich put fucking ask yourself on his head with moral particularism, and he couldn't do shit. I mean, like, so now my question to you would be, one, why would the premise, like, basically, more, like, you can't prove, like, objectively, why morally I should do this or this should be irrelevant in a debate where someone's meta-ethical view might not even be moral objectivism. And two, why would would logical or moral inconsistency, as you put it, be relevant to a debate when there's already moral systems out there that are inconsistent inherently?
Well, to address the first thing, I think you're misinterpreting a bit. I'm not necessarily saying a moral inconsistent view, right, means that something is wrong, right? I'm saying that when you're talking about logical inconsistencies, which is why you brought up to try to defeat the fact that morality is important, metaethics is important within applied ethics, I've said that those logical inconsistencies are inconsistent in a moral framework. For example, utilitarianism. If we were to say, my life matters more than the greater goods matters, that's inconsistent, and that's a falsity entailed only within this particular view. If I were to say, oh, well, within relativism, I think there's an objective meaning, okay, that's inconsistent and a falsity within relativism. I'm not saying, we're not comparing ideologies here, Tygga. Right now, we're just spotting out what inconsistency really is and why there's no real difference between logical inconsistency and moral inconsistency within the scope of one ideology. Now, you may misinterpret this and say, oh, does that mean he's saying logic and morals are the same thing? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying within this very scope of the ideology that it's inconsistent and that it means the same thing. So again, we're not comparing ideologies, we're just clarifying what inconsistency means. And to address your second point, which is really already addressed within my contention with the first point, where you're saying, if you're saying that like moral particularism is inconsistent in itself, I'm just saying that that's my view of it. It can be inconsistent because I'm not defending my moral view right now. That's not what the debate is. The debate is whether morals are important to applied ethics. I'm not defending my moral view. So you attacking that would be more of attacking the wrong thing there, Tygga.
I think that, okay, I'm not saying like morals are bad for a debate, okay? I just said moral systems. What are you on about? Like, more talking about the meta-ethical framework. Why should we be talking about, okay, if I'm having a discussion with you about meta-ethics, doesn't inherently mean I think morals are fucking, like, obsolete in debates, okay? I'm just saying that attacking someone's meta-ethical framework as your first premise in, like, your argument, okay? Like, initial premise is, like, not necessarily good for an applied ethics debate. It's quite actually the opposite, okay? It's more so like this kind of a red herring, to be honest with you, where you could be like, oh, well, instead of talking about like, well, why does this justification for like why this person is veganism, I could also see a debate where we're talking about moral systems and stuff like that and moral ideology, where you're not even talking about, let's say, like why you think this way, or what's the justification underneath your moral view or underneath your moral lens, right? But with this case, right? But let's say like you're debating like someone on any applied ethics topic, and let's say you're a moral objectivist. I'm not saying that you are. Let's say that you just take it, and then let's say that your opponent takes moral subjectivism. Okay, now under moral subjectivism, they don't you'd have to moral subjectivism already concedes the fact that the morals are inherently basically different, not all objectively true or objectively false. Okay, so when you're sitting here debating it, I can imagine the moral objectivist immediately just saying, and immediately as a refutation, is, well, why should we take moral subjectivism take your stance, since your stance is based upon moral subjectivism, and moral subjectivism is literally just saying and justifying, oh, why is this thing, is basically saying that there's no truth values in any moral proposition, so we shouldn't take this at all, and he doesn't even know if this proposition is true or not. And then now you're sitting here talking about, well, moral subjectivism versus moral objectivism, instead of talking about the original goal, which could be literally anything in applied ethics, let's say veganism, death penalty, anything like that. It's kind of it's more so, it's not inherently good for the debate to just sit here and attack basically someone's moral foundation. I don't think that that's what a debate in applied ethics should be. I think that someone in the debate in applied ethics should be hey, I'm attacking you for why you why you think veganism ought to be good, or why should we not do the death penalty, or pro-choice. I'm this reason for pro-choice. When you look at ask yourself debates, okay? Like, ask yourself debates on veganism, okay? You don't really see anyone really talking about, like, their meta-ethical framework. You see, in matter of fact, you don't really see Ask Yourself running, like, meta-ethical framework. He usually runs names and traits. He doesn't really talk about his meta-ethical framework. He talks about, like, oh, well, let's just talk about your logical, like, your moral consistencies, basically, right? Like, as you were saying, right? Now, with this being the case, nobody really says, like, oh, well, what is my meta-ethical framework or whatever like that. He just asks them, okay, name the trait of why you think that animals are evolved like humans, like, or what's the reasoning for it. With this being the case, right? Like, that should be, like, how I imagine, like, our applied ethics debate should go, okay? Where we're not, like, sitting here focused on, like, the meta-ethical, like, properties of, like, oh, well, should this be moral objectivist or should it be more subjectivist? Because, like, if this is the case, right, we could just keep going back, okay? Or, like, some fucking weird shit. Like, imagine, right, like, there's, like, a moral realist, like, you're debating veganism, right? And someone's, like, I don't know, like, let's say just, like, a fucking moral realist, right? Or, like, something moral, like, basically a moral realist, right? And it's, like, somehow they get, like, veganism to, like, that point, right? Where you could just keep going back in, like, the stages of the debates. Like, you could go, like, back to cognitivism versus non-cognitive, like, cognitivism. Like, if you keep, like, if we, like, apply kind of your logic, right? We could just keep going back with more and more and more in a debate until we regress into, like, epistemology, right? Of, like, oh, well, what the fuck? Should this be this, right? So, personally, I don't think, like, applied ethics debate should be really surrounded by, like, let's say, a meta-ethical framework. And 30 chicken figures, of course, it's boring. It's IRL bullshit. What do you expect?
Wait.
What do you expect?
Hold on. Someone's calling me.
Yo, mama calling you, nigga. Ring, ring.
Bro, this kid is a wannabe D1 so bad.
You a fucking wannabe penis, nigga, but you would never get a big penis.
Not funny. Like, what is that? It's not funny.
So weird.
He's trying so hard to be like D1, like, it's embarrassing.
You are D1, because you're both the same height. You're both 5'6".
Nigga, not funny.
Man, I remember when DCF wasn't funny. I remember the days back in KOD, bro. I remember the days.
Those days when you was scaling fucking movie lyrics, you dumbass nigga.
Nigga, you were scaling Wolverine! Shut up! You're such an idiot! You're such an idiot!
You was scaling Bro, did you ever finish that Fortnite scaling?
No, nigga, because I never started! Nigga, he's so stupid. Can I just take Burden of Rejoinder and just win this debate?
That's a good one, dude. That's
Fucking your
toxic. No, mute chicken, bro. He's such a faggot.
But would you say that to his face?
I'm right here.
Bet, I'll
Jen.
meet him and say that.
Jen, burden my dick in your faggotism.
Yes, sir, me. You're gay.
I said, "Burn my dick in your fat." Wait, what did he just say? What the fuck did he just say, bro?
He's gay, like, no one
He just said,
talking.
burn
Fucking
my
weird.
dick in something. What the fuck?
Like, fucking weird. Who is that?
You nigga, that's your mama, nigga.
Yeah.
Yeah, this nigga does not have family. Like, I don't know how he's screaming like that.
Is that a Jedi? Oh, I thought it was Jedi. Nah.
I am your family, boy. Woo! Welcome to the family, son.
Nigga, welcome to the party.
Come on, do you hear him?
I'm off the money he's saying and leaves. That's why I'm over
Bro, Tygga, change your name, bro. I can't stand like looking at like what the fuck.
Yeah, and I can't stand looking at you in real life, nigga. You ugly as fuck. I don't even know why you talking about that.
You gonna let him violate you?
I'm my bad chilling.
Damn, stay in that paper bag. Just like fucking, who the hell is that nigga in Jimmy Neutron? No, not Jimmy Neutron. Jimmy Turner's like Fred. Fred's dad.
I'm on the regular, the bed.
Is that nigga's Chester father still in a paper bag? Man, that's gonna be Jim. That's tough.
Nah, disagreement.
I didn't even, wait, you're serving me to BB? I didn't even serve me you.
I don't know who's serving me to me, bro.
He's just being
Bro, what the Archimedes? That's me laughing like this. Alright, yo, Reggie, I just beat the shit out of you in Clash Royale, bro. How do you feel?
That's your opponent.
It's like your first W.
God, I beat you multiple times. Don't make me expose the. Don't make me catch you in 4K, man.
Yeah, sure. You can.
When's Tygga gonna get back to beating up fucking Archie?
Bro, Archimedes is dead. Like,
She heard Tygga pull out the fucking guns and run away. Crazy.
I'm gonna take a
BB,
shit on
run my
Archie while he
page.
fucking takes a shit on himself.
Oh my god.
bro, mute, bro.
Yo, it's weird.
Where's Stando Doggo? Remember that nigga? Like, Reggie, don't you remember that nigga? Like, Stando Doggo? Who the fuck was that?
I have a 4.8 elixir deck.
Elixir?
I have 4.8 elixir deck going against Renji right now. I beat him last time. I don't know.
Is it like an infinite elixir thing? Or
No.
Yo, he's trying to run
This
my
is
face.
triple threat.
Emish! Bro, it just literally brought in everybody, and the reason why everyone's leaving is because Archimedes is in. I hate Emish. I really do.
You taking hella long to get that
BB,
evidence.
run my face.
It's taking hella
I'm back.
long to get that evidence.
Where's
Sorry.
Black is bad.
Yeah, I'm back.
Oh, he's back?
Yeah.
Oh, here, real quick though. Emish, you debate Dragon Ball. Hush up, nigga. Didn't you get slammed on your head by Hybris? Didn't you get slammed?
Oh, that's tough.
That's tough.
But to address your thing, more of, I think you more of have me confused. I'm not saying, right? All I'm saying is that it's definitely important in applied ethics debate, and morality definitely has some say so in how it goes. When you actually had a conversation with Ask Yourself a few days ago, if you haven't heard, right? Actually, I was just in the server this morning too, but
Flex it.
is, right?
Flex it.
It's flex. But basically, right? We're going over how morality definitely has a way, and if you don't think anything's morally really bad, you can't really name the trait can't really get anywhere from that, right? There has to be some type of comparison factor. So, given this, right, I understand where your analogy, I understand where you're coming from, Tygga, but it's a bit misplaced. And I think you're, again, misunderstanding me. All I'm saying is that it definitely has an important part to play. When you're discussing veganism, right, we're discussing whether it's right or wrong to eat animals. That's morality, whether it's morally right or wrong to eat animals. When you're discussing abortion, whether it's morally right or wrong to abort. When you're discussing death penalty, whether it's morally right or wrong to kill someone, regardless of their crimes or whatever, or whether the death penalty is immoral or not. We're discussing morality in this factor. And I personally think you agree with me, you just have me a bit misunderstood. Okay, I'm saying morality is very important. That's all I'm saying.
I'm gonna beat up by Renji, 1 second.
So hold up, so basically, right? So mid debate, I'm gonna start you. Mid debate, talk shit again, please.
Tygga, give me the SP power committees, bitch.
What?
Yeah. Nah, you're good. Type in chat at each other. Like, is that hard about social? Like, is that hard? Like, it's just. But here's the thing, right?
Yeah, continue.
So basically, right? From what you just said, right? Like, it's morally right or wrong, okay? But you're taking on an important part of it is personally why this person thinks it's right or wrong, okay? Like, it's this person. So personally, and by this person, by basically you saying like it's personally this person, like personally like this person's opinion, right? Like saying like, it's their opinion on why this should be this, okay, or whatever, right? Through divine command theory or some weird ass bullshit, okay, right? Like just saying like, why it's really permissible to eat meat, okay? I don't think that you should like really just necessarily just say like, okay, well since you don't know what right or wrong is, like inherently by your own moral system, like that's just like autistic and just like write it off, okay? Like this kind of this thing, just write it off their whole entire argument based on their just meta-ethical principles. I don't think that's like a good foundation for why someone's argument is like inherently bad. I think that you should try to work under their moral, like their meta-ethical framework, and still like try to like be like, okay, well, if this is like your meta-ethical framework does this as well, and then like why would this like go to this? Okay, just understand understand, try to make an understanding of why this like meta-ethical framework doesn't work, or why this like proposition in itself, or like their justification for it. Like in this like argument, okay, like basically saying like, okay, I have like my meta framework is like utilitarianism, right? And then like they give an argument for like, well, why should it be like helping like the more? Because utilitarianism is like the principle of like the greater the more is outweighs the the need of the view. I think. So if this being the case, right, we should like you should try to argue, well, why is the greater the more in this case like include animals, and I feel like that would be like a better discussion or a better conversation than, let's say, like, oh, just talking about utilitarianism as a whole and just attacking it like, well, utilitarianism could also support like, I don't know, like there's like could also support like fucking child rape, okay, basically, like, right, like that women should be like basically sex slaves for like the rest of their lives. I think that's kind of like a red herring as fuck. Not like, but no, I can see you like bring it up as a point, but like when you just like start like basing your utilitarian belief, right, as like, oh, well, now it's subjective, such a subjective, which should just write off his argument because his meta-ethical framework, my foundation is subjective. Like, I feel like that's kind of just like stupid. I don't think that's like a good way to like have a discussion. I don't think that's like an intellectual way to have like a discussion about a topic. I think that's like very bad. And plus, like, I think like most judges would be like, oh, well, this is kind of stupid. Like, this is kind of stupid because like he obviously has an argument or whatever, and he's obviously worked on an argument, and this person's like dropped a 5, like, let's say this person dropped like a 20 fucking syllogistic like premise, right? 20 premise syllogism, right? And it has like 5 different conclusions, and all of them are inherently correct, and all of them are logically sound. And now you're sitting there just writing off this whole entire argument because at the foundation it's like, oh, well, he doesn't think morals are objective, so like, just doesn't matter. Just fucking just
My
like,
dick is objective.
slap on his wrist. Slap him on the wrist. Like, that's basically what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I understood where you're getting at about, like, what, 5 minutes ago? But, yeah, essentially, right, when you're talking about justification, I understand where you're getting across. We're talking about why we think this, right? But when you're going across, let's
Hey,
say...
wait, hold on. Shut the fuck up in chat, bitch!
Yeah, Tygga, I understand, but, yeah, Tygga, hold on. So when we're discussing about this and when we're talking about this, right, the baseline of reasoning and justification we give is simply what our moral stance is. If someone is a moral, for example, they could be even more relativist, to be honest. You say, oh, okay, well, okay, our morals are based on what our personal beliefs are, or whatever you want to describe it as, and we say, okay, this is my baseline reasoning for it. Our moral ideology determines our justification for it. Is when regarding a discussion about morality and veganism or morality and applied ethics or whatever. I understand your point that it's applied ethics, not meta-ethics, but meta-ethics is just discussing the logical consistency with a moral view. Applied ethics is discussing whether this specific idea fits within this moral ideology or view. Again, that's why we usually have a baseline. As you said yourself, we have a baseline, and we're just like talking about this inconsistency and consistency within this specific point. So to address your second point, that, well, you brought up 5 points, but this thing I'm going to kind of covers those next 4 points. It doesn't really matter, okay? I'm sorry to break it to you. It doesn't really matter, okay? When you're discussing about morals, okay? It's morals. That's what it is. We're discussing morality, not legality. It doesn't matter, okay? So when we say that okay, this specific point brings in this specific reasoning, those reasonings are justifications. I'm pretty sure you could agree to that if you understand what I'm meaning, correct? I'm done here.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention to you. Like, to be honest, for the whole entire time.
Yeah, that's completely fine. You want me to? Yeah, that's completely fine. You want me to restate?
Yeah, just summarize it real quick.
Yeah, sure. So basically, in our moral consistency and our moral view, right, our justification and reasonings for it, right, we discover in meta-ethics whether these moral ideologies are consistent, and within applied ethics, we go outside the scope this moral ideology and discover whether our baseline reasonings are consistent or not. When discussing utilitarianism, if we're discussing veganism within a utilitarian sense, we discuss whether it's consistent within that specific scope. We're not discussing whether the scope itself is consistent, which is what metaethics is. We're discussing whether these ideas within the scope are consistent, which is what applied ethics is. Right now, I feel like you're getting them mixed up in two. And my contention to your next point would be that our justification and baseline for it and our reasonings for it follow upon and are influenced what our own base beliefs by it is, right? We can, as I said during my two contentions ago that I had, even your analogy about ask yourself agrees with me. These things, it doesn't matter, right? Because within a certain moral scope and a certain moral lens, right, you're trying to figure out and trying to get to a general consensus here.
Are you done, or did you randomly cut out there?
No, I'm done. I'm just on push to talk right now.
Okay, so, basically, right? What the fuck is going on in chat? Okay, besides the point, right?
Yeah, just try to focus a little bit. Just get to it, please.
So yeah, I'm really trying, but Piano's over here being a spurg, so I don't know if I can do anything about it. So besides the point, right? It's this like basically right. This is like basically right. Like I think we can just go to conclusions about this because I don't think we're ever going to agree upon this. Like you're never going to convince me that your side is going to be greater than mine. I think it's just like, in this debate is based on persuasion. So after I make this final point and make these final couple of points, we can just go to conclusions and just have like someone who's like just sitting here watching for the whole entire time, like judge it. Probably
yeah, I'm completely fine with that. Again, I don't think I'm ever going to be convinced of yours. You possibly may be convinced of mine. Again, I feel like you're misunderstanding mine a bit, but that just be maybe based off my wording a bit. So I'm completely fine with I'm completely fine with going to conclusions after this. But do you still have anything to cover up or some argumentation?
Yeah. I'm just gonna I'll cover up the last couple of points. I'll like just respond to you. Sure. Then I'll go to like then you could start off conclusions or whatever, and then I'll just do conclusions afterwards. Mm-hmm. So basically, right, what I'm saying, you guys are so fucking weirdos. You guys didn't know piano speed up airplane. You guys are so, but basically, right. When we're talking about like applied ethics, right? Just inherently, okay. It like you keep bringing up like first off, you keep bringing up legality, and I've never brought up legality in this debate. I don't think I've ever been like
I was
saying
just comparing
like,
the two in response to you. It was just for analogous.
Okay, so yeah, so like I've never like really like yeah, because I just kind of want to address that. I don't think like morality
it was just for analogous.
Right,
it was like attention to your point.
Yeah, because if that's the case, then like I don't know, like we could say that it was okay in Nazi Germany to kill all the Jewish people because like it was okay by law. It's okay to discriminate them like freely. So yeah, obviously I don't agree to that. But when we're talking about like moral lenses and more like basically like in applied ethics, right? When we're talking about like this is like a moral framework or that someone should want to run under, right? It's more so just giving you like okay, well here's like the foundation of their reasoning so you can help understand the reasoning more. I don't think that it should be necessarily taken as something that we should like we should start like focusing this as a main point, okay? Because personally, I just think it's a red herring. Because no matter what you say, right, or whatever, if you start going off of their meta-ethical view and just saying like, this is the justification, like their inherent foundation for their justification is like for any of their morals that they have is wrong, then you're not really talking about the topic anymore in anything in applied ethics. Now you're talking about meta-ethical debate on why this should be this, okay? And as I explained earlier, how we could basically just keep going back, or like basically moral anti-realism versus moral realism, keep going back to like cognitism versus non-cognitism, and just keep going back until you literally reach epistemology, right? Because if this is the case in like any debate, right? Like, what's stopping me from, like, literally just saying, like, okay, this man just, like earlier, like, okay, he laid out his reasoning, right? Or, because, like, let's say he's like, I don't like to eat, like, fucking, I don't like to eat, like, let's say I give a definition of, like, veganism, right? It's just basically, like, inherently, it's just basically veganism is don't eat meat products, okay? Like, or don't eat meat, not meat products, just don't eat meat, okay? And let's say B-Man throws me on my head, and he literally says, like, okay, but what about dead animals, though? Like, what's the moral, like, badness of, like, just eating a dead animal in the middle of the woods that died naturally, okay? And let's say he does that, alright? And then I say, well, what the fuck, what's your ethical framework? Like, and then he's like, well, I'm a moral subjectivist, and then I just start beating him up on it because it's just like, oh, okay, well, if that's the case, right, you can't justify why your position's still good or bad because of the foundation of it. You see how kind of, like, retarded that is, right? It's just, like, so stupid. What the fuck? What am I? Okay, the chat is going wild, bro. But besides the point, like, it's like, we're just seeing, like, if you look at a debate like that in applied ethics, right, where we should be more so focused on the topic, but you see how I could just, like, could just turn the wheel a little bit and randomly say, like, oh, well, what is your meta-ethical framework? And now this whole argument, which literally just put me on my forehead because I define veganism like an idiot, like, just doesn't matter anymore, and I just lost. Like, I should have lost the debate. There's no, like, there's basically, like, now I could have, like, a chance of winning now by not even attacking the argument that was at hand, or attacking, like, why, like, that was okay, or, like, attacking the main, like, question that he just said or whatever, right? And just by, like, completely, like, kind of turning the wheel and just start attacking his meta-ethical framework, now I'm in a position to win a debate. And that's, like, how judges would judge a debate in like, applied ethics. I think that's, like, a little bit, like, stupid, in my opinion, like, a little bit, like, redundant. But, that's basically all I kind of want to really respond to. I think I've already responded to most of your points really well beforehand, earlier. So, it'd be kind of like, going into ad nauseum if I readdress them. So, with this case, you can start up, like, your conclusion or whatever.
I have a few points to wrap up before the confusion. Not even points, but more of contentions to what you have just said.
D-Man, I'm a close on your grandma.
Tygga.
I'm sorry, I had to respond to D-Man.
That's fine, you can respond in chat, just hold on. So, basically, I'm on them, hold on. So basically, right, to address your first point, again, meta-ethics is just spotting out whether a moral ideology is consistent or not. Applied ethics is going within a scope of a moral ideology and seeing if it's consistent within that scope. If you're not discussing legality again, I don't think you're fully grasping this point, which is okay. I am probably just wording it wrong, but again, it's the same thing. It's really just like saying within a scope. I think you're just addressing meta ethics as just morality in itself, which is truly not what it is. Right? You can ask any logician, any philosopher. I've read multiple books on this, right? Meta-ethics is just spotting out consistency. So in your analogy, when you said, okay, by that I've won the debate, that would only be addressing, right? You'd still be addressing and giving baseline reasoning for what actually is consistent within this moral ideology, not for the moral ideology itself. That's why I had to clarify earlier when you were taking me up on my stance. I'm not defending my stance. It's not what it is. That's meta-ethics. We're talking about applied ethics. I'm not defending any moral stance I have. I'm spotting out reasoning for why this idea is good within this moral stance, or whether it's bad within this moral stance. So, given that, that's just really my loose contention to what points have, and we can go to conclusions unless you have any more, like, argumentation to progress.
Okay, so, wait. I thought that was your conclusion.
No, you can go first in your conclusion.
Okay, well, I mean, that's kind of weird since you started off the debate. Okay, whatever, but that's besides the point. Basically, right, in my conclusion or whatever, actually, I have to respond to that point that you just made about, like, being, like, not taking morality is meta-ethics, and no, I've already said, like, multiple times that, no, that's, like, not the case.
if you disagree, if I didn't, like, wrap it up, or, like, explain your stance correctly, you can explain your conclusions.
Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. So I'll just do that in conclusions or whatever. Mm-hmm. So basically, right, basically what I'm saying, and when it comes to, like, when we're talking about, like, meta-ethics and morality, okay, and applied ethics, applied ethical debate, okay, what I'm saying is this should be, right, when we're talking about applied ethics, meta-ethics should be a foundation for why this person's reasoning is what it is. I don't think you should attack someone's foundation, okay, because we should just assume that their fucking, like, moral system or whatever should just be alright. Like, because when we're talking about, like, when we're talking about applied ethics, okay, we're not necessarily talking about, well, why is this person's meta-ethical framework like correct or bad, okay, or why is it good, inherently good, or if it's like cohesive or consistent, okay, and why is it bad, okay? Because if this is the case, then we're not talking about applied ethics anymore. We're not even talking about any sort of moral proposition. Now we're talking about like, well, why is this moral system like the reason that we like the way that we should go into this debate? Like, why should we have this moral system in place? Now, with this being the case, right? I don't think this should be like inherently something that we should do, like something that should be like allowed. So with it, and also like Archimedes has also said like, okay, well, you like your position is like morality equals like metaethics. No, I don't think morality equals metaethics at all. That's very like weird. I don't think they think morality inherently just means moral systems. Okay, I think like you could have like I wouldn't say that you won't have like any type of morality without a moral system or whatever, but I think that you could definitely like, be able to have like a good understanding of what morality is without like any like sort of need or knowledge on basically metaethics. So with this being the case, right, when we're talking about a debate, like an applied ethical debate, like I just said in a reference to ask yourself, okay, where he literally has like debates where he's doing name the trait, right, where people literally say like, well, I like to eat animals because it tastes good, okay, and then they want to name the trait on why the fuck tastes good. It's kind of a stupid ass argument. There should be basically, right, like that's like there's no way in that debate or whatever where they're talking about like meta-ethical frameworks. Where and even if it is talking about meta-ethical frameworks, it's just acknowledged for a little bit, okay? And I could like personally when I debated Avi and I told him I was like a moral particularist, he said, okay, I understand that, and then he just moved on from it. He's not attacking like the moral like the meta-ethical framework in and of itself, okay? He's attacking like more so my moral consistencies of why this is like what should be, why should we like believe like your stance or whatever. So it's very like weird and very like I don't know. I don't think Archimedes is really getting my stance at all. But personally, like I think that it won this debate via like just proving that meta-ethical debates are like kind of like meta-ethical debates should not be like meta-ethical debates and applied ethical debates should be kind of separate.
Are you done now? Tygga? Tygga?
He's done. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Anyways.
Please don't take that. Please.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty clear. By the end of your conclusion.
Oh, wait, I was submitted? Wait.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're retarded.
Oh.
Why did you sub me? Wait, whoa.
Tygga, I don't have perms.
Who would have perms? I don't have perms.
Oh, Jutsu, I'm about to name your shit, Jutsu. Get the fuck out of here. Get out of here, Jutsu. Jutsu, wait, hold on. I got your ass. Hold on, get the fuck up out of here, Jutsu. Hold on, anyways.
So,
Hey, put W Tygga in the chat.
So are you?
You get banned.
Oh my god, here. Wow, here.
Jutsu, wait, Tygga, Jutsu's above you.
Yeah, I don't care.
Spam W's, failed assassin, spam W's.
Oh my god, spam W's. Yeah, literally trying to conclude on the debate, and literally, Tygga won't shut the fuck up because, conclusions actually take a while. You think I give a fuck when you niggas are talking about Naruto for 30 minutes and you have to talk about scaling? Please, bro, you guys are really...
So, Tygga, are you... Can I please give my... Yeah, can I please...
Bro, come on.
Wait, hold on, are they getting refutations to conclusions? Like, am I tripping, bro? Like...
They're just going over there training arcs. Like these niggas are just going.
Oh my god,
Marlon, bro, you a bitch. I'm sick of you.
Your grandma's a bitch. Boy, shut up.
I fucked your grandma, nigga.
What?
I fucked your auntie in the back of Zimbabwe.
I fucked your mama in the back of the little kids van.
If it's a random
I didn't.
Wait.
Tygga, can you please? Tygga, can I please give my
conclusion. Get the fuck up out of here. Anyways, right? No, since everybody wants to talk about random tangents, explain why it's a tangent right now. Here, everyone said there was a tangent. I want you to.
That's
I'm
another
watching
thing.
you.
Just go on mute, like you're thinking.
Nah.
Tygga,
Wait.
it's okay. Like, what's going on?
Nah. Explain why it's a tangent. Explain why it's a tangent. Explain why it's a
Can we
tangent.
let
Explain why it's a tangent.
What's the tangent? Like,
Alright,
what?
Ben
Are
and
you
Jordan,
good?
everyone stand
Yeah,
down.
be there. Explain how any of my points were a tangent. I was just responding to everything on the
Right now, nobody cares. Just unmute Archimedes and like let him conclude.
Nigga, I didn't even get to conclude. So like, what are you saying?
Why are you not concluding right now? You're trying to debate us on if it was a tangent. Nobody cares. Okay, another tangent. Like,
Nigga, you
you're still proving everybody. Yo, what's up? Prove my point.
You know what? I'm not even gonna get into it with you, man. I'm just gonna drop that shit. Anyways, right? In conclusion, I won. Yeah, I literally just said in conclusion. I think I won for this reason. And just thinking like why that ethical debate and why exactly. Like look at this. Like bro, come on, bro.
Just stop it. I want to keep going.
I'm gonna lose. You don't even know what we're talking about, you two. You're so stupid. Anyways, man. So,
guys.
In conclusion, I think I won for basically. I think that I distinct meta-ethical debates from applied ethical debates, and I think that we have distinctive like weird like argument that art like morality is a part of like meta-ethics. I think that that's just kind of retarded.
Yeah.
Well, distinct why Archimedes when he was saying like I think morality is part of meta-ethics in general. Well, I think that's kind of stupid as well. But I think that with this being the case, right, I just think that it's kind of stupid that you take the foundation of meta-ethics, right, and, like basically a foundation of someone's personal beliefs and just attack that instead of like the actual argument for why they think that there's something to believe and they believe. And with that, I'll just conclude the debate. All right, Archimedes, you can conclude now.
Who's the judge?
Took me 30 minutes, man. I'm gonna slap you.
I think he left by a rejoinder. So yeah, GG.
Nah, I muted him.
No, I think he said in chat he left. Cause you muted him and you didn't let like use like.
Nah, no, he's here. He's not like.
Someone's ratting hard. What is going on?
Yeah, dude, Reggie, like, these guys are smoke crack, like, and like the sad part is being man. Nah, I'm not talking about you. But like being man, bro. Like, come on, bro. Like, you guys smoking some pipe, like crack, and he doesn't even like, I don't know, bro.
Alright, Renji, give a judgment.
Did you guys make him leave? Keep a judgment. I was too busy like slapping me.
Renji was distracted by me beating him up on Clash.
Nah.
Alright, hold on. I got you. Also, take that invite out of chat, okay? Like, I don't have any problem with Ketsu. Like, yours just Spurs.
Fix that shit, bro. Jutsu fix that.
Here, I got you. Hold on, let me find,
bro,
if
fucking
a bedtime story real quick.
We can like, somehow sort this out.
Alright, so go to locks in the three pairs, bro.
Tigga, I just came back.
Go to locks.
Tigga, are you still giving your bro?
Nah, I was reading a bedtime story. Bedtime story. What about you?
Okay, so can I like,
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
Finally.
Bean Man, I literally just came back to get like a slice of cake, but I came back and then still heard him talking. It was so confusing.
Oh shit.
But
he said
basically,
he could take a cake break. That's crazy. Alright, go ahead.
But basically, if I can remember my conclusions up, like kind of like messed yourself up in your conclusion by saying meta-ethics isn't needed. This is what I meant. That just proved my point. You didn't understand my point. Again, as I said before, meta-ethics is morality. I'm saying morality is important, not meta-ethics, which you agreed to. You said morality doesn't equate to... No, he said, exactly, that means I won.
No,
Tygga, can you stop loud micing Tygga? Yeah.
That was his conclusion.
Yeah, like I don't know if we like interrupt. Okay, there you go. So basically,
interrupted.
Yeah, meta-ethics. I clarified multiple times that I'm saying morality is very important, and that's what I think. And I'm pretty sure you'd agree with me. The thing was whether morality was important to applied ethics, which everyone can attest to me constantly saying repeatedly. I don't know if you just weren't listening, which you probably weren't. I'm pretty boring, but morality is very important to this topic, right? So if this is the case, right, That just means you misinterpreted me, and that means all of your refutations were kind of based. Now, if we can cover your past refutations, which would take like an hour, so I'm not going to fully cover each and every one, but I'm just going to give a quick summary. All you had to say was more of that we're not talking about moral ideologies, which I agree to, we're not. But what we are talking about is scopes within those moral ideologies, which I don't think you fully gave a refutation to, but rather you were just giving false refutations to. So, more of in my conclusion, I think I won because I fully demonstrated why meta-ethical views don't equate to morality and why morality is important within applied ethics. I gave the distinction between the two. You agreed to my distinction. You more of were just confused in what I actually meant, even though I had clarified multiple times. Given this reasoning, I think it's safe to say I won. Possibly high diff, I don't know. But I'd say
so Reggie, can you discuss what the topic of this debate was? Was it literally not talking about like
it was morals.
Okay.
That's all it was.
I thought it was
gonna cap,
ethics.
I was like beating.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd say it's morals.
Okay.
This guy's trying to pull a noodles. What the fuck?
Exactly, bro. And this nigga's a trying to believe it. That's like the worst part.
Can you stop yelling? Can you please stop? Can you stop yelling, please? Can you stop yelling?
Man, I'm gonna give you an aggressive handshake, bro. I'm gonna give you an aggressive handshake. Shut up. Shut up.
Tygga, can you please stop yelling?
Handshake. Shut your mouth. What are you screaming about? Blood?
B-Man! Don't you say
That's some other gay.
That's Spanish.
Wait, that's Pianist?
Yes, I'm
Oh my gosh, can you please just like stop?
Nah, dude, this is Pianist normal interaction.
What do you mean? No, he's trying to continue speaking. You just screaming. Shut up, monkey.
Yeah, you keep constantly like screaming. Like I understand you're pretty hyped, you're excited, but like I feel like
oh my, bro. Weren't you hyped to debate plot too? And then that nigga was like, didn't want to debate you either.
Well, yeah, but I was
trolling. Bro.
But I was trolling. Nor was I, and I'm saying that within this situation, those two situations are completely different because I wasn't screaming at people in the mic.
Guess what? This conversation don't got nothing to do with the debate. Get off
Yeah,
it.
that's why. Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah, who cares? We can move on. Like,
oh my gosh, can you please, bruh, can you please, like.
Who's giving a judgment? No one. No one was here.
Alright, I'll give a judgment. Okay, so
exactly.
Basically, off the first point, I do think Archimedes won.
You explain why.
Oh my god.
He won because
I'm about to debate the fuck out of you, so you better have a good explanation.
Okay, I feel like his point was well enough extrapolated upon. So he won the debate.
Shut up.
Extrapolate, yeah, exactly. So you can go after a hush mode. So I was telling Reggie.
You have no consent with my judgment. I bet. Nice job.
Extrapolated. Define extrapolated real quick. Define extrapolated real quick.
Wait. Before I define that, define these. Alright. Anyway, because I said he won, and I gave an explanation why.
And I said he won.
So you lost both debates just now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So wait. Why does he think you go on a hush when I just like beat your argument? Please.
You were willing to openly debate me on my judgment, and you didn't contend my argument on why he won, so you lose via burden and rejoinder.
Wait.